Hey, what's up, mortals? It's Miggy Sawdust here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 4 of Season 1 of What If Deku Had a Luck Quirk. Just wanted to greet you all by saying, sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. Let's get started. Bakugo sighed as he sat on the ground in annoyance. There was nothing to really complain about since he had received second, with the first being someone with a luck quirk. As frustrating as it was, he was quite used to it at this point and only focused on regaining his breath. Todoroki, on the other hand, had a look of pure disappointment. Glaring at his name situated in third place, he felt insulted. He had a goal in mind, and being overtaken by someone like Izuku felt shameful. The feeling only gnawed deeper at his bones, and as he wiped, he could feel the sweat on his body freezing, further cooling his overall body temperature. The humiliation was almost too much, as Izuku had barely broken a sweat, just casually sitting as far away from everyone as he could. His thoughts started to spiral a little, as his heterochromatic eyes held with sharp blue ones from the crowd. His plan wasn't working, and it irritated him. In the end, Todoroki just sighed before deciding to just crush everyone in the next battle. He gripped his determination with a cold iron fist, and said nothing as Midnight climbed the stage to reveal the next stage. Announcing it to be a cavalry battle, Todoroki couldn't help but internally scoff slightly. It was almost too perfect. You have 15 minutes to form your teams. Ready? Go! At Midnight's call, the one in third place walked up to the classmates he had in mind for an ideal group. Momo and Kaminari immediately agreed when he told them a basic plan, and the boy marched right up to his potential last member. Ida listened to his classmate and agreed that together, they would make a well-balanced group when Izuku stood up. Midoriya had stood on the side, and everyone who knew him expected him to team up with Bakugo. To their surprise, the two boys hadn't even come in contact, and it seemed that Bakugo was already on a full team with Kirishima, Mina, and Sero. They assumed it was because the luck manipulator was given 10 million points, but it still seemed out of character for Bakugo not to see it as a challenge. Just as Todoroki thought that Izuku was going to fail before it started, the person who stood by his side took a step away. A good strategy, but I'm sorry. I'm afraid I must refuse your offer. A fist unconsciously tightened, as the three classmates looked towards Ida with his head looking down. Please don't take this as an insult. It's a good idea, but if I keep following you, I'll never get stronger. Ida pushed his glasses up in determination as he looked over at his classmate. He may be at the top right now, but he's always been pushing his limits both physically and mentally for the good of others. From his point of view, he's at rock bottom while desperately going up. Luck has nothing to do with his progress, and I admire it. Turning his back to Todoroki, whose eyebrows furrowed deeply, Ida walked toward Izuku, who was just approached by Uraraka then. If I'm going to walk down the path, I might as well walk the hardest one to prove myself. Uraraka smiled as the class representative stood by their side. She shared the same thoughts and nodded with determination. They had both seen how hard it had been for the Bringer of Silence, and wanted to prove that they could work just as hard. With only a few minutes left to choose partners, the two of them refused to move from their classmate's side. Todoroki glared at Midoriya, who had just placed another bump in his plan. He exhaled quickly through his nose before turning around, mind racing as he tried to think of someone to fill the hole in his group. Bakugo glanced over his shoulder and internally sighed with relief as he saw his friend. They hadn't interacted much since Midoriya's discovery, and it was an unspoken understanding to just not be together during this event. Even if Izuku had decided he didn't want to stand out, he did want the opportunity to see everyone's quirk, but he had somehow received first place from just slipping down the ice track Todoroki left and jogging the last few meters. He was thinking about dropping out at that point, but during the last few minutes of the team selection, Midoriya had a thought. Internship offers were the aim of the sports festival, and there was someone, in particular, he wanted to be scouted by. Just like how he wanted to stand by Bakugo's side, there was someone who used to stand by All Might's side. In case his top pick turned him down, he wanted to see if he could be scouted, and as a result, stood up to see if anyone would team up with him. Bakugo stepped up with his total of 670-point headband, as Todoroki managed to talk with Tokoyami. Izuku was about to conclude that his team was of 3, when someone none of them recognized walked forward. She had pink hair and carried a bunch of gadgets as she gave him a dramatic speech about showing off her babies. They let her join in the end, as it meant that they had a stronger defense as they ran away, and because she didn't seem to care for his quirk. Strapping on 10,330 points to his head, Midoriya glanced at his teammates who showed him no fear. He told himself that once he was close, They didn't have to worry until afterwards, but he still held his doubts. Getting over fears was not an easy task, and Izuku knew it. It was hard to try and convince his mind that too close was okay. He did spend a decade doing the opposite after all, and he had to gather the resolve to break it in the minute they had left. Even if he was scared, the three warmly smiled at him. It felt like jumping into an endless abyss, but Midoriya knew that this was important and took a deep breath before jumping forward. Fear gripped every cell of his body as the boy felt contact with his teammates. His eyes were pressed tightly shut as if he were worried about something to come. He wasn't sure what to be scared of, but from experience, it was never anything good to those around him. Even if nothing were to happen now, what about afterwards? What if something unspeakable were to happen after the battle? Parting was clearly a bad sign too, and more doubts started to fill his mind. Would they even make it to the end? What if something were to happen halfway through? What if... You ready? Uraraka gently spoke, and the tightly closed eyes slowly opened. She and Hatsume were supporting from the back, and Ida was standing in the front. He was at the center of the group, and what currently held them together. It was a situation where it was difficult to hurt the members without hurting him, but the range was very small. The fact was that they currently stood as a team, and no matter what worry he had, it was going to have to wait. A cool breeze came to help calm his mind, and Izuku glanced down at his teammates. Ready. At the sound of the starting horn, chaos broke loose. Some teams charged forward like lions in easy prey, while others launched long-ranged attacks. Class 1B had collectively decided to go after the points from 1A, and the sound of explosions erupted as Bakugo started to chase Monoma down, his brutal nature shining with murderous intent. Hagakure and her team let out screams when they noticed that they had lost their headbands without realizing it, panicking and accidentally knocking into a team of 2 from the other hero class. Malicious laughter broke out as Shoji ran around, seemingly alone, but upon closer inspection from Team Todoroki, who was the aim, Asui and Mineta were hidden inside his webbed arms. More shrieks echoed as the purple one couldn't feel his headband, and the next thing they knew, Team Shiozaki from Class 1B had their points swinging around from the end of her hair. Everything was being taken and attacked. Everyone was running around and panicking. Everyone was trying to steal more points. Everyone except... Well, that was anticlimactic. The comment was so blunt that Ida couldn't help but snort a little, and even Hatsume, who was so blinded by her inventions that the jokes flew over her head, let out a smile. Izuku stared wide-eyed at the girl who was standing with a pout on her face to his left, and felt a bit dumbfounded. He wasn't sure how to react. After all, it was true. And that was it. They had expected a fight and literally nothing happened. It felt silly that they had braced themselves for a full-on attack. So, what now? Hatsume looked around as she tried to figure out what was going on, and Ida just kept chuckling. 1B was going after 1A with the exception of the first place, since it was just too much attention, and 1A knew of their classmate's quirk. Those two simple facts left their team with literally no attackers, and so much freedom that the pink-haired support student started to talk about her inventions to Ida. Izuku also looked around before glancing down at Uraraka, who was waiting for an answer. Not sure, but... Uraraka understood despite the lack of words, and cleared her throat to catch the attention of her peers. Well, since we're going to be ignored, how about we take a run and let's see how many points we can get? The idea seemed silly at first, and Izuku saw no real reason to go through with it. It was true that deep down, he wished to join in the festivities, but the way Uraraka had worded it, it seemed more like a game, and less like an event that only happened 3 times in their lives. This was a serious turning point in their lives, but... I don't see why not. Ida agreed with the statement, and Hatsume nodded, pulling out even more gadgets from who knows where. We can test out my babies while we're at it. Want to try these first? And just like that, the jetpack on Izuku's back lifted them all into the air. Ida's engines propelled them forward, and the next thing they knew, even more chaos was added to the students. Ochako casually took a headband that was before her eyes, as Hatsume let out a laugh. Ida chuckled as they took another giant jump and once again terrorized a bunch of unsuspecting students. They were just jumping around the stadium like a giant cricket, and it was comedic for the audience to watch. To be honest, this video is sponsored by NordVPN. Staying safe online is an ever-growing difficulty and hackers could exploit you. NordVPN allows you to change your IP address, making you harder to track, securing your privacy. In addition to providing you with safe passwords through the web, you can also expand the reach of your favorite streaming services. Are you tired of going through 2, 3, or even 4 streaming services just to watch your favorite anime? Well, with NordVPN, You can change your country and be able to binge shows like My Hero Academia, Naruto, and many others on your favorite streaming service with just a press of a button. Check out the link in the description to get 72% off when buying for 2 years, $3.29 a month. This is a deal for a limited time, and thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. I'm still not sure how we got these bands from just jumping around, but let's keep going. They tied the third band around Izuku's neck, and Hatsume decided to press a button on his side. A grappling hook extended, and within a second, the team was barreling to the other side of the battlegrounds, almost crashing into Team Bakugo. Hey! The annoyed yell caused Izuku to turn around, and at the sight of his face, Bakugo was forced to hold back a laugh. The teen was no longer wearing an expressionless face, and instead had a look of utter bewilderment. He looked like a confused puppy with a new toy, and it was enough to cause Bakugo to chuckle slightly. He was happy to see that Izuku was actually enjoying something for the first time, but he really didn't expect that the grenade enjoyed being thrown around the air. It was so random that the human grenade just shook his head and gave up trying to look annoyed. Catch you later, Izuku. I still have to catch that copycat bastard from 1B. He grinned before bonking Kirishima on the head, causing their team to run after the other blonde. Manama was unable to collect any more points as they played cat and mouse around the stadium, and Izuku finally paid attention to his own face. His mouth had just been hanging open in surprise the whole time, and when he realized this, he quickly shut it again. It was rather embarrassing to know that the world had just been watching him and his team like that, but at the same time, it left a warm feeling inside. The corners of his mouth tilted ever so slightly upwards as he concluded that for once, he just didn't care. With only a minute left of the cavalry battle, the giggling teens had to decide on what they wanted to end their runaround with. At that point, Ida spoke up. I would have never expected my experience with the sports festival to go like this, and I must admit that I do not regret it. The two girls agreed, and Izuku nodded. The class rep smiled as he told everyone to brace themselves. As silly as it seemed, they had all worked hard just to have fun, and Ida was very satisfied with the results. They were still in first place, had gone above and beyond to collect more points, and had pushed his quirk in ways he hadn't expected. To control their trajectory, Ida had to focus on the control of his engine's outfit, just as Uraraka also had to control how much she made weightless to not go over her own limit. Hatsume also got to show off a lot of her gadgets, and Izuku was able to experience something he never knew he could. Pushing his glasses up, the engines on Ida's calves huffed and started to shine a bright blue. With one last yell, Team Izuku whizzed around the stadium with smiles on their faces. I got another one. Izuku looked at his right hand, which accidentally caught the trailing end of a headband, and then laughed before cheering. President Mike screamed into the microphone, yelling that he was unable to see what had just happened as Ida explained about his latest super move that he made up. Whose is it? Uraraka wondered before they turned around, and at that second, Todoroki's team let out a yell. They immediately ran toward the Greenette's team, hands outstretched to get either of their own or Izuku's headband. There were only a couple of seconds left of the cavalry battle, and flames burst around the ice user's left side as he tried to make a desperate grab for points. A cold wind blew through to cool Izuku's body, but they flickered the flames toward Todoroki, causing him to make a blind grab. Hands connected to a headband and the buzzer went off, causing a massive sigh to fall through everyone. It was an intense ending, and all eyes turned toward the leaderboard. We stayed first at the end! Uraraka cheered happily as her teammates showed their happiness in their own ways. They had won with a total of 10,001,005 points. Bakugo's team was announced second with 1,365 points. Somehow a dark horse slipped in as Shinso's team was next with 1,125 points, and Kaminari sighed in relief as they were announced fourth. Tokoyami held up a headband with 165 points as Todoroki looked down at the 125 in his hands. He was less concerned about how he missed where Izuku's head was supposed to be, and more about how he ignited flames. Their team advanced with 810 points, but it was a very close call. With the four teams announced, it was time for a lunch break. Izuku? Bakugo looked around for his friend, but was met with Uraraka shaking her head. They were all celebrating just a minute ago, when Todoroki suddenly stormed over, trying to reach Izuku, who was about to step away from his cavalry group. Just as he was explaining to the others to be careful, Todoroki bumped into Hatsume with her gadgets and a crash resonated around. Many eyes turned to see the commotion before Izuku could panic, and Uraraka burst into laughing. Well, so much for being careful. Ida chuckled too as he picked himself up, helping to return the slightly damaged gadgets. They all sighed in relief when Hatsume told them that the damage only meant more room for improvement. Their light-hearted response to receiving a tumble brought out a slightly amused huff from Izuku as he gazed warmly at the students before him. He was feeling a small rush of what he identified as relief, and it felt nice. Even if the result was a little silly, Izuku was grateful that he chose to participate as far as he did. Unfortunately, the only one who didn't find the fall funny was Todoroki, who was trying to get his own poker face under control. He immediately tapped Midoriya's hand when he picked himself up, and asked it to speak to him in private. The others exchanged worried glances between themselves as the dual quirk user stormed off, and only intensified when Izuku followed through. Just before he was out of sight, though, he glanced over his shoulder to give him a small wave, and the simple gesture put both Uraraka and Ida at ease. Bakugo wandered down the corridor that his class rep had pointed out, ears noticing a presence ahead before his eyes could. There were people just around the corner, and their identities were revealed from their voices. "I'm not done with you. I'm done with you." Although it was hard to tell from the tone, Bakugo could hear that Izuku was feeling fed up with whatever was going on. Peeking around the corner, the blonde watched as both boys were leaning against the wall, facing each other in intense silence. Neither spoke as they conversed with glares until Izuku sighed in annoyance. Pushing off the wall, he headed toward Bakugo and Todoroki spoke up again. "I'll win. I'll do it without him. Without using my left side, I'll..." He was cut off as Izuku turned around, bottomless, empty eyes boring into his body like the Grim Reaper to his victims' souls. Ghostly fingers seemed to dance up his spine, ringing each vertebrae like a death bell as it passed, sending uncomfortable shivers from the tip of the boy's fingers down to his toes. Goosebumps kissed his skin and the air seemed so thick that it was hard to breathe. With how the cavalry battle went, Todoroki had forgotten that this was how his classmate usually was. He thought he knew fear. He was wrong. Why? The one-word question shook Todoroki in ways he didn't understand. He tried to speak, but not a single word came out. Izuku was the one holding the conversation, and he could no longer add to it. "Don't involve me. I have nothing to do with this." Izuku left like a ghost gliding down the hall, leaving a chill as he did. Midoriya didn't seem to have noticed his friend and disappeared down another corridor as the blonde glanced at Todoroki. Shoto slid to the ground, left hand to the left eye as he scowled deeply. "If I have the chance to fight him again, I'll win. Then I'll prove it." Despite hoping that the dual quirk user's wish would never come true, Bakugo sighed as he saw the map of fighters displayed. The human grenade wondered if Izuku had seen the outcome before deciding that his friend knew how to handle himself. He probably didn't want to stand out like the other two who had dropped out early, and figured that Izuku was planning to just purposely lose the first round. Everyone was cheering from President Mike's excited commentary, and they grew louder as a mop of purple hair could be seen on the other side of the stage. "The first match of the first round of the first tournament is here! From the General Studies, it's Hitsushi Shinso!" The student who heavily resembled 1A's homeroom teacher casually scratched the back of his neck as he sauntered onto the stage. He had been waiting to get back at those who looked down on him, and he wasn't going to let this opportunity go. At least that's what Shinso was thinking about as the voice hero screamed into the microphone again. "Versus, from the hero course, Izuku!" President Mike dragged out Izuku's name before explaining the rules, and Midoriya sighed eternally before reaching where he is supposed to stand. His face was even more nonchalant than his opponent's somehow, and Aizawa inputted a few comments of his own. President Mike had paused when he realized he didn't know Izuku's full name. Everyone called him Izuku as far as he was aware of, but no one seemed to know his family name. Glancing down at the register, he found the student carried on his commentary with even more vigor than before. "Ready for the first battle, folks? Start!" Shinso was about to speak when Izuku turned around and started to walk towards the edge of the ring. The general studies student was unsure how to react, and accidentally tried to call out to his opponent. Izuku turned around and looked the other in the eyes before sighing. It seemed that his irritation from earlier was pushing words out of his usually mute mouth. "Just stop. I know your quirk. I'm not interested in getting any more attention, so just take the win." With that, he headed off stage. "What's this? Hitoshi Shinso has won! His opponent has simply walked out!" Standing alone in the ring, Shinso was unsure how to react. He had had this plan to insult Izuku's classmate, but it was obviously in vain. It didn't really matter since it meant he could be more effective in his next battle. But it still felt odd. He had won the battle, but somehow he felt like he had lost. After all, how was Izuku able to know something that his own classmates barely knew? There were 3 general studies courses, each with unique students, and the 2 hadn't even crossed paths before that point, because Shinso hadn't seen Izuku when he went to their classroom. In fact, Shinso hadn't even known of Izuku's existence until today. Deciding it didn't matter, the Insomniac also left the stage.
Well, that was expected! No fighting at all!
Izuku could still hear President Mike's commentary despite reaching quite far down the hall already. He shook his head as if he was physically trying not to hear noise.
I hope the next round is better! Come on, kids! This is a sports festival! Let's have some enthusiasm!
The crowd's cheering was a sharp contrast to Izuku's tired mind. It was just completely empty as he was worn out from talking to Todoroki earlier. He just didn't understand why his classmate would try and involve him in matters that didn't concern him. Didn't he make it clear that he wanted nothing to do with anyone if possible? Mike's yelling was still ongoing as the next round of students were rushing to get ready. Izuku's match had finished a lot earlier than expected, and the voice hero was just filling the gaps.
Hitoshi Shinso is moving to the next round! I wonder who his opponent will be! Still, I can't believe his opponent just walked out like that!
Oh, so he is Izuku Midoriya! What? Izuku sighed as he tried not to think. He already knew the consequences of his decisions, and still didn't care. After all, he wasn't going to repeat his mistakes.
What could Izuku Midoriya be thinking?
What? At the sound of his family name, Midoriya suddenly felt his limbs lock up. It was as if he was underwater, and all he could hear was the resonance of his pounding heart. Mike's voice seemed nothing more than a distant blur, and a large headache seemed to swell from the pits of his stomach. His breathing stifled as everything seemed to freeze. His body was hot and he couldn't tell up from down. It was like someone had pressed pause on his life, and the boy was suddenly reminded of why he hated his quirk as much as he did. If only it was as simple as just disliking his quirk. As Izuku felt his face make contact with the floor, only one word escaped from his lips.
Mom. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in this information thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, if you're in the mood for some great storytelling, We the Celestials has got you covered. Our We the Celestials My Hero Academia and Naruto What If channels retell the story of their namesake anime with a twist. I mean, like this video. Check it out if you're interested. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details can be found in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I'd like to extend an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being that we only accept members from 16 years up. You can sign up for whatever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and have a divine day.